this map will explore health, wholeness, healing in the relationship between the larger body of which we're a part and the individual human ego through which we experience ourselves and the larger body. And we're going to look at 13 different metrics for examining health versus dis-ease. And the first one is just the general paradigm, which is that at the center of reality is a mathematical formula that's represented by the sphere. The sphere is the most elegant, the most intelligent, the most efficient shape or pattern for moving energy, and thus for life. We pick it for the wheel because when you apply energy to a motor, a wheel will move a vehicle forward more elegantly than anything else, with more ease. And in the framework of ease and dis-ease, we're looking for symmetry, we're looking for balance, we're looking for grace, which is embodied in the shape of the sphere. And so there's an underlying predisposition to efficiency within all of reality. Reality wants to focus, wants to exist in grace, in ease, in a spherical shape. And we create dis-ease through the lens of the human ego in relationship with the rest of reality, as we use distended paradigms, distended ideas, asymmetrical dogmas imposed over reality to create an asymmetrical pattern of behavior that creates pain, that creates dis-ease. And every human ego has a link. We could call it a link to the higher self, a divine link, a connection, a thread to the rest of reality. Now, a scientist would see this thread in the ecological awareness that is our nature. For example, our breath connects us to the living environment which creates oxygen. So one thread of connection is through breath. Another thread of connection is through liquid. As we drink water from our environment, our personal environment, much like an individual cell in a larger body, is rejuvenated. As we drink liquid, we are rejuvenated. As cells within our body absorb the liquid that we drink, they are rejuvenated. Then there's food. Food is a denser form of energy that our body regularly consumes and transforms into fertilizer, which nourish the plants that supply our food, creating a relationship in this dimension. So urine fertilizes plants through liquid, feces fertilizes plants through a more solid matter. There is a symbiotic relationship. And then we want shade, so we connect with a shady area of our environment, perhaps turning parts of nature into an umbrella and producing shade. So really, at a scientific level, there is no difference between this thing that we call self and that thing that we call earth. Between this part that we call me and that bit that we call you. There are far more commonalities and threads that connect each of the pieces. Then there are distinctions that separate the pieces, even to the extent that 99% of our genetic code is identical, even to the extent that our culture defines a great deal of who we are, and even our thinking through language. So we have this scientific reality of our connectedness, and then we have a cultural reality of our dissociation, of our uniqueness. And to find the uniqueness, we have to drill into very specific regions and engage in that area. We have to say, okay, I've got a ring, you've got a ring, but your ring is green and mine is orange. So you see, we're different people. And I've got a necklace, you've got a necklace, but your necklace is 30% bigger than mine. So we're different people. And I've got a voice and you've got a voice, but your voice sounds slightly different. And I've got a phone and you've got a phone, but your phone is this brand. So there are these distinctions. But to emphasize the uniqueness of the individual, we really have to zero in on specific things that are marginally different. So in this higher self mathematics reality tether, what we're looking at is the mathematical relationship between each of us as individuals and the larger whole. We're looking at the resonant template, the field template of the whole, of the synergy, of the peak end of possibility, which is in the high mathematical domain. Most high mathematicians reach a point, much like Einstein, in which there is a poetry, there is a dance, there is a living relationship between high mathematics and consciousness. You know, even the playful dance of trying to get a photon. You know, in subatomic levels, the photon seems to know which side you're going to take a photo. And if you take a photo, if you ask a single photon to decide whether it's a particle or a wave or this or that, it kind of depends on where you take the photo. If you take the photo over here, then it's a this. If you take the photo over here, then it's this other thing. Well, how did it know? It can only be in one place at a time according to this law of lineality. And so why is it anticipating where we're going to take the photo? Is it playing peekaboo at a subatomic level? Anticipating and saying, you want to see me in this shape? I'll be over here. You want to see me in this shape? I'll be over here. At this level, how can you not begin to comprehend that reality is bigger than consciousness, but includes intention and consciousness? Now this high mathematics, this symmetry, because health, heal, whole, the spherical symmetry as the most graceful shape of converting energy in the universe. It's easier to move a sphere than any other shape. This is grounded in mathematics and is grounded in the larger reality. The rest of our influences as an ego are grounded in other human beings and are influenced at least 70% by culture. Now you'll notice the root word of culture is cult. And one of the ways, or one of the reasons that cult is a dirty word is that we understand that cult-like behavior is dangerous, irrational, and copycat. So one of the ways, one of the reasons people say, well, don't join a cult, is because, for example, in Jonestown, when everyone drank the Kool-Aid, the idea is it's dangerous, you died. It's irrational. Why do you need a religion where everyone kills themselves? And it's copycat. Like, you'd never have all committed suicide if you hadn't joined this religion. So it's a cult-like phenomena. And of course, cultures, some more extreme, some less extreme, some more irrational, some less irrational, have the exact same traits. There are plenty of things that happen every day in a cult, in a culture, that are very difficult to justify mathematically, scientifically, etc. They are dangerous, and they're done because everyone else is doing them. Now, when we go to a culture on the African continent, in which, say, around the age of 13 or so, a young woman is initiated into womanhood by the laceration, by the severing of the clitoris, often with a rusty machete. And the vagina is sewn up except for a small area for urine to be released as an initiation ritual from girl into woman. We say, well, that cult-like phenomena, which has been going on for hundreds of years, is dangerous. It is irrational. And the only reason it's being done is because the mother before did it and the mother before did it. In other words, it's a copycat phenomena. And then we come over to the West, where within a week of being born, often in the hospital within the first few hours of birth, a young boy has his foreskin chopped off with a knife called circumcision. And you say, well, why is this happening? It similarly reduces pleasure by about 30%. Dubious origin. There's not a lot of strong science one way or another that would say this is good or bad. It's obviously traumatic for the infant, who knows the various psychological impacts over time. And it is being done primarily because everyone else is doing it. Yet while we would all agree that, young women having their clitoris cut off is a horrible thing, we would not call it genital mutilation, what we're doing to our young men. We're asleep within the cult-like haze of copycat phenomena. And so most of these other influences on the ego are cult influences. 70% of our experience, particularly in a Western world, where most of us engage with synthetic environments more than in real environments. We go to work in a synthetic environment, we drive on a synthetic environment, we do our work on a synthetic environment, we talk in a synthetic environment, we're using language which is a synthetic technology. It's not as if nature gives complex language to creatures. It's very much a cultural phenomena, and so we have a lot of influence from the family, from the cultural system, from a lover, from friends, from work, from advertising, chosen media, the environment in which we live, as well as this innate connection with wholeness, with something more. So let's look at this paradigm of wholeness and healing, and how this circular ideal, the original mathematics, and one of the interesting principles about a circle at a very small level is that as you're building a circle within a computer, for example, you build it up with lines. And so in a very real sense, a circle is a wave formation if it's seen as a whole, or if you see it as bits, it is an infinite number of lines, an infinite number of particle dots. It's a curve, and it's an infinite number of dots, much like the energy at a subatomic level that chooses between a particle and a wave-like formation depending on how it is viewed, anticipating the engagement with human consciousness. So we have this spherical shape, and that's our guide for wholeness. What we're looking for is to overlay the concept of the sphere, of multidimensional balance and symmetry on different distinctions in order to diagnose and assess where we personally are within the context of the optimal whole. So one of the things that we're looking for is range. So range is one of the first distinctions of mental, physical, and emotional health. Now think of a wrist. Now if I can move my wrist all the way like this, you could say I've got range this way and this way and this way, meaning if within the limits of the bone structure, I can move my muscles in the full up and down, sideways and backwards, in and out. What we're dealing with is as close to a spherical range as possible. And so an analysis would say, there's nothing wrong with your muscles. But if I go like, I have pain like that, I can go like that fine, I can go like that fine, but I've got dis-ease. Well, then we're zeroing in on what's the problem that is preventing the full range of expression. And so this is an overlay that we can apply to any area of our life. We can look at our thoughts. For example, do you have access to the full range of your thoughts? Can you zoom out and have big picture thoughts and then zoom in and have micro thoughts? It's like, I can do the day-to-day micro thoughts, but I have no ability to zoom my consciousness out and look at my life as an art project. I don't have range in paradigm. I don't have range in perspective. So I just don't have range. So now we know we have a mental disease. We have a mental limitation. I can't open up in that area. I can open up here and here, but I can't do this mentally. So you have mental disease. That's a blockage. That's a stuck energy. So you have range and you have intensity. Now intensity, which correlates to speed. For example, if I can do this very, 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 very slowly, and I can go like that, I've got range and intensity and speed. If I can feel something that's very hot and very cold, that's intense and not intense, I've got range and intensity. So again, physically, emotionally, mentally, what's my range? What's the continuum between hot and cold, intense and mild, and the full spectrum? For example, within diet, there's 5 core palates. And you can assess the range of a culture in part by its diet. American culture likes sweet, salt, and then a little spicy. It doesn't like bitter, it doesn't like sour, and it doesn't like ungent. So you could say, well, there's a good 20% missing. Now, Jonathan Haidt, in his work about the right and left in American politics, points out that Republicans or conservatives value freedom, value human rights, and so justice and freedom. They also value tradition. They also value religion. And there's something else that they value. I haven't read the book in a while. And Democrats or liberals value freedom and justice, but don't value tradition and don't value family, and don't value, I think it's religion. And so a Democrat will get worked up if someone's rights are being violated. Someone's speech is being oppressed, this and that and the other. And what Jonathan Haidt found in his research is that because the liberal perspective is two-pronged, freedom and justice, and the conservative perspective is five-pronged, that liberals often demonize conservatives when, for example, there's a tension between tradition and justice. So when there's a tension between an invisible value, something the liberal does not value, and a visible value of justice that they do acknowledge, when there's no acknowledge of the counterpoint, it is a maddening thing. It's like, why don't you value freedom? Why don't you value justice? A woman's right to choose, a woman's freedom, and it's like, yes, we do value the woman's right to choose and freedom, but we also value family, tradition, religion. And there's a tension between those two. Meaning at some point, if everyone went around killing their babies, there would be no family. Abortion is not traditional. And the Bible does not seem to condone it. So there's a tension. Yes, we do value freedom, and yes, we do value justice, but we also value these other things. And this is similar to, if you just value sweet and salty, you get one type of body. If you value sweet, salty, sour, hot, and ungent, you get a different diet. You get a diet like the Thai diet, or perhaps the Japanese diet, which is a healthier diet. Meaning, Japanese were not becoming obese until fast food with a sweet, hot, and salty emphasis, with a lot of starch, started invading Japan. Now the Japanese are becoming as obese as Americans at the same level, meaning it's nothing genetic. It's about diet. Diet of thinking, diet of feeling, diet of eating, diet of doing. So however you create a circle out of the food palette, one could measure one's ease or one's dis-ease by how distended that circle becomes to one area. if you only eat hot stuff and nothing bitter and nothing sweet, and etc., if you only eat sour stuff, if you only eat stuff with no flavor at all, that there's an imbalance. So we're looking at range and we're looking at intensity. Now, the next thing to look at is dimension. So spherical shape, range, spherical shape, intensity, and we're looking at dimension. So we're looking at diet. We're looking at thinking. We're looking at behavior. We're looking at feelings. For example, can you feel hate with the same intensity that you can feel love? Can you feel love with the same intensity that you can feel hate? Can you feel a little bit of love, then a little bit more, then a little bit more, then a little bit more, and then full out love? Or can you only be, I love them completely, or I don't love them at all? I was with a girlfriend once, and I noticed this extreme polarity in the way that she saw me. I was either a demon or an angel, but I never seemed to be able to exist in between. And I was neither, of course. I was not a demon. I was not an angel. There's a complex set of distinctions going on inside me that are who I am. And for her, I had to be in one of those boxes. And so I said, Claire, I said, I want you to pay attention. I'm an angel in your eyes right now. I'm an angel, right? Okay, you think I'm wonderful. You just said how great and amazing I am. And just now watch this. In the next few minutes, you're going to call me an absolute demon and not want to talk to me. But I'm still the same me, because I'm neither the angel, I'm not the demon, I'm somewhere in the middle, but you won't let me be as I am. I have to be a demon or an angel, and of course, it's a little bit schizophrenic since the same person gets relabeled periodically. So I said, watch what I'm going to say. Now, what I'm going to say is completely honest. It's completely true. But it is the very thing that I avoid saying to you, because as soon as I say this, I'm a demon. And as soon as I say this other thing, I'm an angel. But they're both true. There's just no middle ground in the exchange. I said, are you ready? You ready to call me a demon and hang up on me? And okay, so fine. I think I was 30 seconds in before, that's wrong, da-da-da-da-da. It's like, see, you don't want me to continue, do you? And the phone went dead. So there I am, in the demon chair again. And so the question is, do you have range, or is it kind of a fixation on the extremes? Now, this can be the extremes of the love of my life, Satan's offspring, or it can be the extreme, the extremes of I need to do spiritual work, or I have no time for spirituality, or the extremes of I hate you, or you're bad, or any extreme. If your only position are these two switches, you do not have wholeness, because the vast majority of existence exists on the continuum between both extremes. The vast majority of existence exists on the continuum between the two extremes. If you've got infinite voltage and no voltage, the vast amount of power settings are 10 volts, 11 volts, 11.2, 11. You've got infinite spectrum in that. And so health, wholeness, is the ability to move within the full extent of that spectrum. It's very much like if you can imagine this larger mathematical template of the circle and then finding a dot anywhere on it. The healthy ego can turn its attention to this point of the dot, this point of the dot, this point of the dot. They're all real. They're at different points on the continuums. This is a feeling of hatred that I feel over here, and I feel it at 8 intensity. This is a feeling of gratitude that I feel over here at 2 intensity. This is a feeling of gratitude at 8 intensity. Over here is this, over here is this, over here is this. And it's important to understand that within polarity, but within a polarity of masculine and feminine energy, within the polarity of up and down, within any polarity, within a dualistic system, there are going to exist both sides of a continuum. Meaning, in order for an empath to exist, a sociopath has to exist. Because they're both located on the empathic-sociopathic continuum. Now, they don't have to exist in actuality because you have varying degrees of density. You have possibility, and then when possibility squares, you have probability, and then when probability squares, you have actuality as the energy folds back and forth on itself and becomes denser and denser. As you go from a thought, I might like an ice cream cone one day. You press buy now on Amazon for an ice cream cone maker, and the probability that you will have an ice cream cone suddenly goes up significantly. When the machine is sitting on the counter and you press start, the probability that you will have an ice cream cone turns into the actuality of an ice cream cone before your eyes. But there is a densification process to go from the idea, I'd like an ice cream cone sometime, to, yeah, but I can't afford it, but I don't really want it that much, but where am I going to put it? Well, it's just a possibility. It's no longer, it hasn't become a probability. So we're looking at range in dimensions. Now, there's a couple of different dimensions that are important, but it's also worth mentioning that dimensionality is infinite. There are infinite dimensions. But you want to work with a few core dimensions in order to notice if you're stuck. For example, the triad of heart, mind, and body is a good triad to start. Because if you can feel any feeling at any intensity, if you can explore your mind at every distance, in every area, past, present, and future, you've got a pretty healthy system, meaning you've got a pretty whole system. Meaning you've got the sphere that is overlaid on that domain, and you can navigate freely within the entire sphere. The paradox, the duality, is contained within the whole. You can feel positive, negative, up, down, very emotional, completely detached from emotion, etc. So you've got dimensions. So you've got heart, mind, and body. You've got diet and finances. So if you overlay wholeness on finances, what does wholeness mean? Well, for example, is there some degree of symmetry between the amount that you're spending and the amount that you're making? Are you spending a lot more than you're making? Are you making a lot more than you're spending? Rockefeller Sr. got sick to the point of losing his hair as he was feverishly making money. There's a story of him in the insurance office with, one of his ships is out at sea, and he's already one of the richest men in the world at the time. And one of his ships is out at sea in a storm. And the insurance agent will let him buy insurance on the ship up until the point where the news that the ship sank came in. And Rockefeller's waiting and waiting, and there's a storm getting better at worse. He's pacing up and down the insurance agent's room. He's like, I can't bear to spend the money on the insurance premium. But I couldn't bear it even more if I lost the whole cargo of my ship. He's frantic with this. And he's hoarding. So you'd look at that pattern and you'd say, Rockefeller, you never enjoy spending money. you obsess about making money, you are asymmetrical. You are sick. You have no range. Broaden your outlook. Obsess about spending money as much as you obsess about hoarding money, and you will become healthy. Now, in his older age, of course, he flipped to doing the Rockefeller Foundation and giving away money. His hair grew back. He became a healthy human being. So there are infinite numbers of dimensions. There are significant areas of our life to pay attention to. We've got giving as well as receiving. Giving intensely, receiving intensely. Can I give intensely, but I can't receive intensely because that would make me needy because this, that, and the other. And here's where we come in with the tension between the symmetry in the mathematics of the whole and the individual cult or culture. Because we have a bizarre cult that says that if you give, you're an important person. You're high on the cult hierarchy. But if you receive, you're weak. And you do the math on this and you say, well, wait a minute now. How is it that you need me to receive for you to give? Meaning if I won't receive from you, you can't give to me. Scientific fact. So you want to be big and important and all of that. So you want to give something. Yes, okay. But you can't do it if I won't receive it. Okay. And I'm not going to receive it. So you can't be big. You can't give me energy. I'm not going to receive it. No, I'm not going to do it. You want to feel like you're an important guy because you're sleeping with me. But I'm not going to receive your affection. No. You send me a card, I'm going to ignore it. You send me a text, I'm not doing it. So how is it that you are more important than me? Meaning in the exchange of energy, there has to be a masculine and a feminine pole. Doesn't matter if it's two men, two women. There has to be a masculine and a feminine pole. That's what creates the flow. For an exchange to take place, a flow needs to take place. For a flow to take place, one person has to say, how about it? And the other person has to say yes. How about it and no is not a flow. There's no exchange. So how exactly do you arrive, Mr. Culture? And let's be honest, it is a masculine culture in a chauvinistic paradigm. How is it, Mr. Culture, that you are so sure that the giver is more important than the recipient in an exchange that cannot occur without a recipient? How is it that you arrived at that? Well, it's very simple. So-and-so said so, so-and-so said so, their parents before that said so. Aha, the cult program. The cult program that says that giving is good and receiving is bad. So everyone wants to be givers, only there's no receivers except secretly. Now, of course, the problem with secret receiving is then nobody gets honored for the giving either. And nobody gets honored for the receiving. That was really big of you to receive that. You received that criticism very well. You received that gift magnificently. You responded with to that invitation with panache, with grace. How amazing it is that you received that gift. No, I'm small, I'm weak. I'm building up my confidence to be more masculine and assertive and make invitations myself. I'm not going to receive invitations. I'm not going to be a follower. I don't want my daughter to grow up to follow other people. I want her to be a leader. I want her to, order people around because then she'll be high ranking. Something my clients tell me about their daughters. The clients don't ever brag about the daughter that followed someone. They don't brag about the daughter that received a gift. They don't brag about the daughter who is artistic. They don't brag about the daughter who has emotional feelings. They don't brag about the daughter's sensitivity. They do not ever brag to me about the femininity of their daughter or their son. But you should listen to the clients brag about the go-getter, masculine daughter who's telling other men what to do, because that's high ranking. So you have a symmetrical total system in an asymmetrical and sick culture. An asymmetrical and sick culture overemphasizes a small spectrum of this range of intensity and diversity, and then shames those that step outside of the range and rewards people for staying in their little box. So if we applied this kind of rather asymmetrical and ugly shape into the circle, anything that fits inside the line is kosher, everything else taboo. We don't talk about rape at dinner. Why not? It seems like there's been a rape and we're eating dinner. Well, we just don't. And since you're obviously too dumb to realize that, you will not be invited to dinner to this house again. And if you're looking at me puzzled, you must be even dumber than I thought, because you should have realized that as well. And off we go. The culture makes no sense. So we have infinite dimensions, but amongst them some key dimensions: cultural dimensions, emotional dimension, mental dimension, physical dimension, financial dimension, religious dimension, mathematical dimensions. We've got all these infinite dimensions. And the more wholeness and symmetry you have on the more dimensions, the healthier you become. The more whole one is, the more freedom and grace emerges. Except as it intersects with the cult. So there's a tension between the spirituality, the relationship with the whole and that which is bigger than human, the relationship with the probability field, and the relationship with the cult. So, for example, a stiff boardroom meeting could be opened up by doing Tai Chi before making a business deal. And an intelligent and healthy individual could stand up in the board meeting and say, I'd like to notice which points in our body feel tight around this deal. And I'd like to notice which parts feel flow around this deal. I'd like to engage with you on that level. I'd like to feel this. And I'd like us to assess the business deal physically. How do each of our bodies feel around this deal? And where, like, you've got a lump in your shoulder as well. Me too. That's where I feel this business deal isn't working. Now, I have no idea why, because we're looking through a paradigm that's very narrow, and it looks good in the box. But we're smart enough to know that the deal, of course, is bigger than the box through which we're looking. And it doesn't feel good on the shoulder. George Soros has, as one of our world's leading financiers, he's known for breaking the Bank of England with challenging the fundamental valuation of the pound against the euro. He made a $10 billion bet that the Bank of England could not substantiate its claim of the valuation with the euro. That got publicized, and so the man who broke the Bank of England. So George Soros is of course well educated in finance, but someone close to him says, George does not rely on all the sophisticated theories. Now, if you ask him to do an interview, he will talk about the speed of the quants in New York versus the speed of quants in London. He'll talk your ear off about all of the science behind his investing decisions, because that looks good in a cult that elevates science and de-elevates instinct. Because the feminine is the nonverbal, and the masculine is the verbal. Now, this may sound odd to why women talk so much, but the communication that comes through body and tone, that comes in the circle dynamic of engagement, that comes in presence, is the communication that is most feminine. And the communication that comes in the little boxcars called words that are strung together in this is the communication that's most masculine. And in this dynamic, instinct and body muscles, etc., are the more feminine part of the decision-making process. The underlying fundamentals that Buffett will look at. Buffett is much more of a masculine and fundamental investor than Soros in this regard. So in that dimension, Buffett, is going to look at the PI, the debt, and he'll just scan thousands of stocks, and every few years he'll make a big investment if the opportunity is correct, based on the numbers. Soros is different. He's more feminine. Someone close to Soros said, it's not about the numbers. George Soros gets out of a deal fast when his back hurts. If George is involved in trading in this and that, and he gets that backache, he gets out of that trade. And that's why he doesn't lose money, because his back knows something that he doesn't know, but he knows enough to know that the back knows more than he does, so he follows his back. And this doesn't fit into journalistic. Well, journalists want to be cool. And what's cool is the highest deity in the culture. Now, 500 years ago, that was the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was cool. So when the Catholic Church said that the earth was flat and the sun went around the earth, that was cool. When Galileo brought in the scientific principle and said, no, it doesn't seem to be. Have a look, Mr. Cardinal, have a look. What do you see? The cardinal wouldn't look through the telescope. To do so would be blasphemous. Even to doubt the divine scripture and look with one's own eyes would be sacrilege. So instead, Galileo was arrested and da-da-da. So that was the deity of the day. Well, the current deity is science. Numbers, measurements. There's a very interesting story with numbers and measurements by Descartes. So, René Descartes, Cartesian logic, I think, therefore I am. Well, René Descartes was a French mercenary. And he's going along his way, I think, committing, laying siege on some alchemists of the time, because this, in the politics of the day, someone wanted those alchemists killed. So René Descartes out laying siege on an alchemist duke of some kind, and then he gets a vision from an angel. And the angel said, the world will be conquered by measurements and numbers. Go forth, René Descartes, and master the world with measurements and numbers. And René Descartes said, well, I'm a good Christian. The angel told me to do it. So off he goes, and, Cartesian logic is born. Well, then, fast forward a few centuries, and science was born at the missive of an angel. But scientists don't want to talk about that. This is outrage. It's like, what do you mean? We don't want to, this is shameful. If we can't see it with our own senses, it doesn't exist. So here you have, obviously, a fault in range. You have that which is visible and that which is invisible. That's obviously a natural polarity. Can you get more obvious than that as a polarity? Visible and invisible? Like, what would be the opposite of visible? Super visible? No, that's not really the opposite of visible. It's more visible. No, visible and invisible. Known and unknown. Mysterious and known. Yeah, these are normal polarities. So how are you doing science, now that you're the new deity? How are you doing with the unknown? How are you doing with the invisible? How are you doing with the mystery? How are you doing with the inner world? How are you dealing with the inner multiverse? Mr. Science, again, a masculine expression, science, the art of measuring and numbering. But of course, the feminine is the gap in between. You take a thing, and of course, we only call it a thing and think of it as a thing because our cult teaches us that things are inanimate. There are other cultures of the 10,000 cultures in human history that say that things are not inanimate, that they are living parts of us. But we all do what our cults tell us to do, and our cults tell us to look at things, as separate static things. So we take a thing, first of all, and we say it has nothing to do with us because it's a thing, and that's what things are. They're those things that have nothing to do with us. And then we measure the thing. And we say this thing is 3 feet long. And just to be thorough, it is 2 feet wide. So here's our thing. Okay. 3 feet long and 2 feet wide. That's what it is. But of course, that's not what it is. It is something that we've processed as a thing of this size. Now then you say, well, science is the art of naming and measuring. It is a table. A table is a thing like this, and it is 3 by 2 feet long. So now we've viewed the object through the Cartesian model. René Descartes, Cartesian, the Cartesian model of scientific objectivity. But let's take a little bit of a closer look. You have the proton and electron in the atom formation, one spinning around each other. You have the Earth spinning around the sun. You have a lot of fractal patterns where one thing repeats itself at bigger and bigger scale. We look more closely at this table. And first of all, the way it feels when you're eating breakfast on it is not affected that much by whether it's called a centimeter or a foot. So why are we emphasizing that point culturally? No, this is 58 centimeters, it's not 3 feet. Well, neither affects the way it feels eating breakfast. So why emphasize that? Well, that's what we do in our cult. We've deified the measurement and naming of things. And so naturally, that is a huge difference. It is a defining moment, centimeters or feet. But then you look more closely. For example, you name the proton and you name the electron in the atomic structure. Okay, that's the thing, right? But 99.9% of the atom is space, the gap in between. Well, there's no name for that, is there? What about that unit of space and that unit and that unit and that unit? Well, we haven't named that. In other words, it's the unnamed. In other words, it's the unknown. In other words, it's the feminine. It's the space between the dots. It's the silences between the words. It's the space between 1 foot and 1 foot. It's the space between 1 second and the second second and the third second. Do you know that with the pivot of time from lineal time into vertical time, which is one of the things that happens in dreams, in waking time, let's bring it down where you can see it. In waking time, the second goes from here to here linearly. But in dream time, the consciousness goes up here, down here, up here, down here, up here, down here, experiences 2 weeks of time in the space of a single second. Because it's not traveling horizontally, it's traveling vertically and horizontally. And if you go zigzagging enough, it's like a highway. Is it 4 miles as the crow flies, or is it 26 miles as the road curves? Well, consciousness doesn't fly as the crow flies. Consciousness follows the road, which curves and zigzags back and forms interesting geometric shapes, and if it's healthy, moves in a spiral or a spherical direction. So consciousness doesn't follow the straight line. Consciousness follows a feminine pattern, an associative line, a relational line. You see, memory is more feminine in many ways, where you can access it linearly. Okay, what did I do yesterday? What was the day before? But what about those smells, the smell of new-grown grass? My girlfriend. I'm back there in an instant because of the association with the smell and emotion. There was an intense feeling event with that smell, and the feeling comes back to me when I smell that smell. Now, this is the feminine terrain of memory. So the point is that science, the new deity of the day, is, of course, obsessed with itself. Most unhealthy dogmas are very self-absorbed. And they're threatened by everything else, which is why you have a hit squad sent out on anyone that's suggesting that reality could be feminine, that reality could be masculine and feminine simultaneously, that both could actually be welcome at the same table, and that, in fact, they're both the same thing, that the circle is both the wave and the feminine and an infinite number of lines and the masculine. That the circle provides space for every geometric shape to be born within it, and that every geometric shape can be used to create and restore the circle. Well, maybe there's room for both at the table. So a healthy culture isn't going from these extremes of science doesn't exist, this 2,000-year-old book does, to religion and mystery and unknown and nonverbal doesn't exist. Only what you can see, only the outer objective world as defined by Cartesian logic, forgetting, of course, the fact that Cartesian logic came from an angel. Like, how do you measure that? Do you mean to say that our arrogant scientists wouldn't exist if an angel hadn't come along and mentioned this to René Descartes? It's like, no, that doesn't sound very important to me. Let's delete the angel from the equation and emphasize Cartesian logic. The independent man, he was a man. Well, maybe the angel was a woman. Maybe the birthplace of science was a woman. An invisible, non-physical woman giving a gift to a visible, rational man. Maybe the synergy of the two is what gave rise to the growth and evolution, the many gifts that come from the scientific principle. Just as there are many gifts that come and can come from the feminine principle, the principle George Soros uses to avoid losing lots of money through his back pain. The next step of health is regulation and attunement. And there's a couple of different faces of this. But one of the things, like, for example, in landscape design, which I do, if I have an object, let's say a house that's this big, and I want to create a relationship with the shape of the house. Most houses are square boxes, so here's a nice little square box. If I want to create a shape, and it's 20 times smaller, than the house, it's probably going to emphasize the size of the house as opposed to make the house feel more at ease in the space. So if I want to create a shape that makes the house feel related to, I might plant a big tree that's twice or that's half as tall as the house. Now the eye says, there's a shape and there's a shape half its size. They kind of belong together. There's a shape and there's a shape 20 times bigger. Not so much. And so we have a gap. And that's the principle of regulation and attunement. So you are, and there's a correlation between health, wholeness, and sanity. Meaning, if this finger weighs, a tenth of a pound, whatever it is, and I bring in a 20-ton jack and start pumping, that's used to lift up semi-trucks, a 20-ton jack pumping, to lift this finger, you're going to say, that's a little bit excessive to lift a finger. A pencil could have done it. A baby could have done it. Why get a 20-ton jack just to lift this finger? Well, there's only one reason to get a 20-ton jack to lift a finger, or among a few, but one of them was that you have no awareness and no distinction of that is attuning with the actual weight of this finger. Maybe you saw something before that needed a 20-ton jack, and you have no idea how things are weighed. And so you think everything needs a 20-ton jack. So this is an example where you have insanity through a lack of attunement. You're not regulating the force for the individual situation. And this you're not regulating the force for the individual situation is less healthy. It's the more regulated something is. It takes exactly 2 pounds of pressure to move this finger. We send a 2.1 pound force over that way. Intelligent, healthy. It shows understanding. It shows intimacy. It shows awareness. So you've got a higher degree of wholeness with intimacy and with awareness. You also have correlation, which is a measure of health and wholeness, etc. So if you understand that arsenic kills people and vitamin C typically makes the body a little better, or to be even on safer science, how about vitamin D3? There's all kinds of ups and downs about vitamin C in the last, some years, but vitamin D3 is on pretty stable ground. An MD, a homeopath, someone that knows their stuff will say, yes, Americans are vitamin D3 deficient, and it's one of the best vitamins to take if you're feeling a bit under the weather and want to know what type of thing you could take. So you correlate data with behavior. Now, if you say, I want to get to Santa Rosa, which is north, and you get on Highway 101 and head to San Francisco, there's a little bit of a tenuous relationship between those two. So part of health and wholeness is the sanity piece, which is the corollary piece that if you want to get to Santa Rosa, you get north on the freeway. And if you want to get to San Francisco, you go south. It's a little bit healthier. We're looking at attunement, integration, and part of this is, and this is a slightly different distinction. Are we partnering with the reality that is, accepting this is the reality, and based on this being the reality, we're partnering with it to say, okay, this is a mountain here. I want to move this mountain. I want to move it by next month because I want to put a house on this mountain, or I want to build a dam, or whatever it is. There's a mountain here. Looks like it is 20,000 tons. Okay, that's 20,000 scoops with an excavator. That's 20,000 yards, cubic yards of soil, that needs to be moved in 30 days, okay? So that's more than 1,000. Let's factor in entropy and stuff. So let's say we're aiming for equipment to get on site that can move 1,000 yards a day. Well, 1,000 yards a day is going to be tough for one machine, so we need 5 machines. 5 machines of this size with these trucks lined up. Okay, we can have it done in 30 days. Okay. That's called sanity. I want to move this mountain. I have no idea how big it is, but I'm getting out my shovel. I'd like it done by next month. The universe will find a way. And you get out your little 5-gallon bucket. This is insanity. A month later, the mountain will be 99% intact. So you have not attuned. Now, you're also fighting with reality to a certain extent, particularly if you're getting worked up about it. If you shovel harder, it's like, oh gosh, I'm going to shovel up. I really got to shovel with this mountain. You're starting to fight with reality, because there's no sane way that tripling your shoveling speed and going from 1% of the mountain to 3% of the mountain, in 30 days is going to, be a great job. And it may kill your body if you overexert and don't hydrate and all of that, which is part of attunement again. We're looking at system theory in general. So we've got regulation, partnering versus fighting. We've also got correlation. You don't inject arsenic for better health. How about some vitamin D? That's correlating with data, with reality. The other metric of health, healing, or wholeness is consciousness. Now, 99.9% of everything there is to know is unknown. Oh, sure, we know our bedspread, we know our sheepskin, we know our dog, etc. But that's because we're staying in a very, very tiny part of reality. All you have to do is drive for 1 hour in any direction, and suddenly 99.9% of what you're seeing is new. Now, you may say, oh, that's the same sky, I get it, but the clouds are all different than they were before. You may say, oh, that's general land and soil, I know that, but it's different composition, it's different acreages, all the lots have different names, the different numbers, different subdivisions, the whole thing, different animal names. There's a tremendous amount that changes. The people, I don't know their names anymore. And sure, you can quickly find it out with things like Google, but that's just driving an hour in your country, in your town. Get on a plane and fly to Thailand, and wow, it's like, I don't know the language, I don't know this, I don't know why they're doing this. Why are they eating bugs? Do they like them? Are they nutritious? Are they safe? I don't know. So this is feminine terrain. But part of sanity is the balance of masculine and feminine. In many ways, one of the reasons we're such a chauvinistic culture, meaning we emphasize the masculine, is precisely because the feminine is so big. Remember, you have two little points that are masculine, the proton and the electron, and then you have 99% space in between. You have the earth and the sun, and 99% of the gap in between is space. That's a lot of feminine presence. I know the name for that bug, and I know the name for that bug. And then there's 10,000 bugs I don't know the name of. That's a lot of unknown. I know that that's a viper. I have no idea what the other snakes are. That's a lot of unknown. I know where this road goes, and this road isn't this road, but, 99.9% of the roads on the planet, I don't know where they go. I don't know what they're called. I've never been there. And so there's a lot that's unknown, and it is that fear of the unknown in a certain sense that we, overemphasize the masculine. But it's also worth, knowing that we have got, because consciousness is the domain of the ego, and because consciousness is tethered to language, and because language is tethered to thought, we cannot integrate and digest something on an ego level that we have no name for it. You see, if even with following the feminine instinct of his back, George Soros couldn't be unconscious of what the word back means, unconscious of his body, unconscious of the level of pain he was in, and thus have no consciousness. Then when his back ached, he would not be conscious that it ached. He would not then have noticed the pattern. It seems to ache before a bad deal. If you do enough trades and 90% of the time they go south, the back was aching a few hours beforehand, you pay attention if you value money, because you make more money if you listen to your back. So this is the sign of intelligence. The sign of intelligence is you notice what seems to correlate with the things that matter to you. If 99% of the time this correlates with this thing that's really important, then you pay attention because it's a betting average. Even if you're wrong 1% of the time, if you could go to Vegas and 99% of your bets would make money, then anyone who wanted money would be a fool not to be in Vegas placing bets. The reason you're a fool to place bets in Vegas is that 60% of the time they lose money, which means that 90 to 98% of everyone who goes and bets money in Vegas comes back poorer. So you should go to Vegas with that statistic if you want to lose money. So that's correlation. Conscious just means you've got to have language. You've got to be conscious of the feelings. I talk with women sometimes and I say, what are you feeling? They say, I don't know. I say, well, is it anger? Is it fear? I don't know. Well, your face moved like that. I'm pretty sure. I think what you were feeling. Yes, you're right. I'm feeling this about this. See, now you can respond. And you cannot move back into symmetry until you notice the asymmetry. You cannot heal a bleeding finger if you're not conscious that it's bleeding. Now, of course, the problem with the materialistic external focus of our cult is that there are lots of inner bleeding that are bleeding the life energy of our hearts away, that are not being stitched up because we are unconscious of the wound, and it's killing us emotionally, but we're unconscious of our feelings. And so one day we just find that we're bled dry, and we feel very strange as the emotional body collapses. And we don't know what happened because we're not conscious. So you need an element of consciousness and awareness through language in order to be healthy and whole. You also need distinction, which is enabled by language. And what I mean by that is, if you say, I've got, meters, and that's your distinction. Is it 2 meters or 3 meters? That's very useful. But it's not as useful as saying and having millimeters as well. It's 1 meter, 200 millimeters. Now, why is that distinction so important? Well, let's say you have a fridge. My landlord is replacing my fridge right now. He wants to know the size of the cavity. Well, if the cavity is 1 meter, 300 millimeters, and the fridge is 1 meter, 250 millimeters, and that fridge is half the price of the one that's 1 meter, 400 millimeters, that wouldn't fit. That's a useful distinction, meaning it saves money, it saves grace, it gives certainty. You don't carry a fridge all the way from the place, get it, and it's like, oh, if it was so close. But people do this in relationships all the time. So close to working, but they didn't have the distinction to notice the cutoff point. It's just a little bit too fast for me. I can't go there, or I won't go there. How many inches were you off by? Well, I don't really think in inches. I don't know. Maybe it was miles too fast. Maybe it was inches too fast. I don't know. I just know it's too fast. Well, if you don't have the distinctions, you don't have the ability to negotiate and say, could you just slow down 20%? I do this with masseuses all the time. They all want a massage too fast. Now, 1 in 10 can slow down to the presence that I'm interested in, 1 in 10, which means I have to have 10 conversations with 10 different masseuses or masseurs, doesn't matter the gender. And then I ask each of them to slow down 300%, 500%. I want you to slow down 5 times. 1 in 10 slows down 5 times. 80%, dip down about 50%, then get impatient and speed up to a level that they don't have to think and be present too much. Well, there you have it. They can't do it. But I've got to be able to communicate 100%, 500%, 300%. I can't just say slower. I mean, I used to just say slower. And then people would dip down 20%. It's like, you have no idea. You needed to dip down 500%. 20% is not going to do it. I am going to feel worse after this massage than I would feel if I was out on the beach resting. So I'm not going to pay to feel worse. So it's 500% or nothing. Or, okay, I'll compromise at 400% because I don't want to interview 20 people. And, it's like that. You're in the top 10%. Okay, I'll go with that. So you've got to be conscious and you've got to have a distinction in the domain that works, a distinction that matters. Now, a good way of looking at that is in running a business. Can you have a healthy business if you only think in thousands? Not necessarily. Now, if you keep 30,000 extra in the bank, it should be all right. I like to do that because then I don't have to balance my checkbook. Just glance at it once a month, saves time. But in a situation where you're dealing in hundreds, but you're only thinking in thousands, once you get below the 1,000 point, you don't know if you're overdrawn or have still, because as long as you have just $25 in the bank, you're not overdrawn. And then you're not going to get a $36 overdrawn fee, which then triples, and as you then get overdrawn again, and you can manage it. So you've got to have distinctions at the level that counts for your progression forward. Towards what? Well, another way of looking at health and healing and wholeness is creating a flow, an exchange of energy, a partnering of masculine and feminine energy that moves one through Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. In other words, if my engagement with all of this is helping me to survive, meaning last month I didn't know if I would make it. This month, I'm going to make it. But I don't have security about that. I could get hit with this. I could get, who knows. And now this month, I'm feeling more secure. I met this person. They're going to help me. I found someone to talk to. I feel more secure. And then I now feel like I belong. It's like this person smiles at me every time I come. I feel welcome. And this person accepts me and knows who I am. I feel welcome. And my local government has a place for me, as opposed to, we don't want you around here, and the church I feel love and belonging. Okay, so you're progressing, and then I feel good about myself. I like who I am. I like, I was reading a little book by the Peace Pilgrim. Someone gave that to me, and I just read it after not reading it for a couple of years. It was there, and then I read it, and here's a woman who decided to walk more than 26,000 miles for more than 30 years, praying through walking for peace, without any money, without making money, without receiving money, with just praying for peace through walking. An unusual pilgrimage in United States materialism, general culture, an unusual step. And so, I don't actually remember where I was going with that story, which also then ties in with this thing of association and integration, because sometimes a thought splinters and our consciousness doesn't follow the thought. So there's a little bit more dis-ease, there's a little bit more rupture in a pattern where that happens a lot of the time, as opposed to a pattern where every thread connects and we see where it goes. We have another aspect of health and wholeness, which is in the relationship with the ego, with the superstructure of mathematics, the higher self, the divinity, the larger multiverse, and the family system, the cultural system, the lover system, the friend system, the work system, the advertising system, the media system, and the environment system. It's important, in order for the individual to be healthy, that it have a sense of boundaries. This is the area where I'm different. My family likes depressed people. It breeds depressed people. 80% of the people that come out of my family system are depressed. And there's a reason for that. It has a shape like this. This is the ritual of the family. This is the abuse system of the family. This is the denial system of the family. This is the craziness of the family. This is the shame system of the family. So it has these shapes that I was asked to take on as an infant to belong to that system. Now, those shapes feel absolutely horrible. They're so painful, I don't even want to go there. They're so crazy, I don't even know how to think about that. They're so bizarre. They're the family system. And where differentiation comes into health, healing, and wholeness is one has to be able to draw a line and say, this is my optimal self. This is the natural me. That's one distinction, one differentiation. This is my family system. You've got to actually spend a little time to study it and say, okay, so the drinking seemed to go from Uncle Henry 200 years ago to Grandfather Bill 180 years ago to this, to this. Okay, so there's a thread of drinking that's going through every third male. Then there seems to be a shame around money that came in at here, then it got passed on to here. This seems to be a repeating pattern. Nobody seems to be able to feel anything in this family system for the last 100 years. Aha, okay. Well, that's pretty good evidence that it's a family system thing as opposed to something else. Like, what about nearby families? Could they feel anything? That could be a cultural system that nobody could feel. No, the neighbors could feel something. My family couldn't feel anything. Aha, so the lack of feeling is the family system. It's not the cultural system. Now, the materialism is the cultural system and the family system as well. So it's both. But the lack of feeling, more a family system and more on the male side. Or in my family, everything feminine is patronized and humiliated in both the men and the women. And so the way we deal with that is we all try and be more masculine and shunt the feminine energy off behind closed doors. So you need this distinction between this is me, this is the optimal structure and optimal relationship with the superstructure, with the mathematics, the divinity, etc. And this is who I became to relate to my family. Meaning my family couldn't deal with me because I had feelings, and feelings weren't welcome in my family. Now, I still had feelings because that's what human beings do. But after a few beatings, after a few glares, after a few threats, after watching everyone around me be praised for not having feelings, I decided to suppress my feelings to be praised and belong to the family. I am no longer a whole and healthy person. I am now someone who belongs to a sick family system by adopting the dis-ease, adopting the shape that is asymmetrical, insane, painful, but that makes me fit in with an insane system. You can look at it like trucks docking at a docking bay. So if someone develops a far superior trucking technology and they pull up to Safeway for the order, they've come up with this great system. Well, Safeway still has its docking bay set up for the inferior system. When Elon Musk invented the high performance electric car with Tesla, where do you get charge? Was everyone's comment. And so the supercharger network, is the restructuring of the other side, the charging port. So when you have the truck that won't fit the loading dock, it's too big, it's too small, etc., then you have dissociation. We don't connect there. I speak English, you speak Japanese. We don't have feelings in this family. You have feelings. You must not belong in this family. And so this creates a crisis in survival. So I stopped feeling to fit the family system. I started focusing on sneakers to fit the cultural system. I started pretending that I wasn't afraid because my lover likes strong, silent types, and she punishes people who are honest about their feelings. So she fit very nicely into my family abuse system. So my lover and my family both punish me for feelings, so I also pretended not to have feelings over here. Now, every single deviation from the sphere, from symmetry, from the underlying mathematics, creates dis-ease, which creates pain. But it creates association and regulation and attunement with the diseased environment around us. None of these shapes are symmetrical. You get into the work environment and suddenly you find feelings are not welcome there either. That is unprofessional. I have a Hispanic crew, and then I have a client who says yes when she means no. And the Hispanic crew, the wife was there. It's much more of a family kind of engagement plan, and I enjoy this. I find it very healthy. It's not American, it's healthy. And so I actually hire the brother, the main foreman, the father, and the wife, and their best friend. So we got 4 family units, and I do that in an un-American situation because it's not efficient. The dad doesn't know what he's doing half the time, so I have a deal with the son that he can work with his dad if he supervises him and da-da-da. But either way, they're functioning as a family, and I think that's intelligent. It's just very unprofessional. And so anyway, it turns out that my foreman's wife asked my client's daughter if she could do laundry for her son while waiting for the crew to finish up. And the client came home and she said to me, "It seems a little odd, the crew asking to do laundry in my house." And that's her point. I said, well, I don't have any big say one way or another, but since it's making you uncomfortable, I will ask the crew not to do that. They haven't done that before, and I can understand it is not usual. But I didn't say it was unhealthy, and I said I think that in Latino cultures, there's more of a sense of helping and family than in our culture. So it's probably not terribly unusual where they were born, or they wouldn't have done it. We do what our cult teaches us. But the key thing was that my client, being a good businesswoman, was very aware, working in a big corporation, this is not what professionals do. And so I reinforce the box. I tell Elmer, you can't ask clients to do laundry in their house. Why? Because it doesn't fit into the box. Is it intelligent if you need to do laundry and you're sitting around doing nothing to do laundry? Yes, it is intelligent. Is it intelligent to give and receive with anyone who's around who's a human being? Yes, that's intelligent. Did clean clothes come out of the laundry? Yes, they did. Is it professional as defined in this cult? No, it is not. So since these this cult is all about feeling comfortable in professional roles, then you cannot do that and fit the comfort zone. If you want this client to say, we're a great crew, what she's going to be thinking is this a professional crew? And I have noticed in the United States that if you behave professionally, even if it makes people incredibly uncomfortable, even if it's painful, even if it's absurd, they will recommend you because you were professional, even if it wasn't what they wanted. Meaning you might have a client that likes to sleep in until 10 a.m. Let's say you arrive at 11 a.m. at work. They're not going to say, how lovely it is that you didn't start work and woke me up. They're going to say, this crew isn't very professional, isn't it? They start a bit late. It's not very hardworking and professional, because that's what the culture trains us to think. And so people will actually refer something that is more uncomfortable and irrational, but is professional, over something that is more rational and comfortable, but is odd. It's not normal. And so there's this tension between the cult and between happiness. And most people feel comfortable with the cult over their own happiness, which is why you will watch people in this cult murder their dreams every day of the week to fit in with a picture that this cult has said is a good picture in favor of their own heart, in favor of their own dream, over their own dreams. So you have the workbox, and the workbox says, I get paid more money when I say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and I don't make any jokes, and I don't do this and this, and I'm very professional. Then this people like to pay me lots of money. But when I start going into my full circle, they're like, what are you? This is not professional behavior. Why are you talking to me about my marriage? That's not what gardeners talk about. What is this? Laundry, marriage? What do I feel about this? I mean, who are you? You're not fitting the box. And so there's a little game, that goes on. We'll pay you lots of money to fit in the box. We'll punish you for going outside the box. So you form this line and you hide the circle in this terrain. And then you come, into the advertising terrain, that is where we sell the subliminal mind to the highest bidder. The highest bidder, by definition, needs to be the most unethical product. Meaning, if you have the cheapest, best solution to a situation, then one, you probably can't afford advertising because you have the cheapest solution, and two, you don't need to. The Model 3 was the best-selling car around the world with zero advertising. A good product doesn't need advertising. So who needs to advertise? Someone with a really shitty product that needs to convince influenceable people to buy their product over a better, cheaper product. They need to spend a lot of money. So the highest advertiser in general will not be in the client's interest. But the highest bidder for the ad spot will get the ad spot. Because, again, we're shareholder value focused as opposed to what's in the consumer's interest focused. So the advertising shape, have you ever noticed how bizarre beer or wine tastes? Most of it is a bit sour, a bit strange. It's not as good as just pure grape juice. If you eat a fresh grape, it's delicious to a baby, to an elderly person who's dying. It's delicious. A kid takes their first taste of wine, and it's like, what is this? Well, you have to learn, the acquired taste of the cult. Well, we don't just drink fresh grape juice, etc. So you have the advertising, you have your media, which is usually emphasizing the ideal version of the cult, which makes everyone feel comfortable. So in current media, you have the dumb, stupid guy being made fun of, preferably by women to fit in with the feminist movement. That's a really important part of being politically correct with the current version of the cult. So if you're a comedian, if you're a guy, make fun of yourself for the most part and talk about what a putz you are. Everyone loves Raymond. Let's see how putsy men can be, how dumb they can be, in order to make everyone comfortable with the idea that that's just how men are. And then of course, if you get rewarded for that, then you play along and you fit the role. Just like projection identification. And then finally you have environment. And this is a huge influence, because let's say, like my house, the street is 20 feet from the front door. Well, if I have an infant in that house, just like people throughout all time, I will leave the door open from time to time. But there's a difference. I will have low-grade anxiety in the awareness that my child is going to run out into the road one of these days when the gate is open and the door is open and a car goes by. So my anxiety is going to go up because of the environment. And the environment was not designed with infants in mind. If it was, there might be circular communes with 30 or 40 to 70 people living in little communities with no cars, with safe fencing, where everyone knew each other, where people looked after each other's kids, where multi-generations of family would participate together, the old and the young, and where people would be focused a lot more on the children. If the environment was designed to attune to infancy. But of course, it isn't designed to tune to infancy. It's designed to attune to coolness. And being near a street and in a city is cool, according to the cult. And so everyone who has a child in such a cool environment has 10-20% low-grade anxiety, constantly wondering when the accident is going to occur in an environment that is predisposed to pain for an infant, for a child, and which they're living in day after day. The differentiation is, this is who I want to be, and this is who I naturally am, and this is kind of my higher template, my higher power, my optimal field, and this is who I've become in order to fit. Meaning I've raised my anxiety level to live in a cool house with an infant. I have shut down my feelings for the family system. I've bought brand name labels to fit in with this culture. I've pretended that I'm not scared to be fucked by my lover. I've pretended to my friend that I don't mind having little texting conversations every once in a while, as opposed to spending weekends together because there's no time. I fit into the work box of the overworked, addictive, non-emotional, conforming employee. I'm buying the things the advertisers have told me to buy. I'm watching the media everyone else watches so that I fit in. And there is my actual shape now as my adaptation to all of these influences. And then this is my optimum shape, who I'm longing to be. And I am here. This is me in optimal. And this is who I've become. And these are these things. This friend, this lover, etc. is not me. That's who they want me to be. That's how I engage with them. So we have differentiation. That's part of health. But you also have partnering and attunement. That's also part of health. Meaning, even if you've got a sick system around you, every infant will teach you attune to the sick system. You've got an alcoholic, sexually abusive father and a passive, shame-based mother who won't talk and won't protect her femininity or the femininity in her son. What's that infant going to do? Does he commit suicide in the womb because they can feel the field out there? Do they get born and say, this is crazy and fucked up. Let me get back in the womb. Well, they may think that, but they can't get back in. Do they run away at 1 year old? No. They watch the facial expressions of both parents. They learn what part of them is barely tolerated and which part is hated. They learn to express themselves in a way that will minimize the violence and will amplify their chances of survival, security, love and belonging, and a sense of self-esteem within the family system and within the culture. And they adapt wildly to keep the secrets, tell the lies, etc., that these systems demand. Then usually they'll find a lover that fits in with both the cult and the family system, so everyone's comfortable, and the lover has done their own adaptation, is nowhere near where their optimal self is. And so the unhealthy system attunes to the unhealthy system, and you start moving through Maslow's hierarchy of needs until such point as you can differentiate as a 18, 20, 30-year-old, where you can now provide for your own needs. Now another level of differentiation is quite healthy. To understand, this is how I had to be at home. This is how I have to be at work. But now I want to create my own job with my own culture. I want to create my own marriage with my own relationship process that reflects who I am. In my family, we could never talk about loneliness. I would like to have a partner where anytime either one of us feels lonely, we just, hey, I've got some loneliness coming up and I'd like to talk about it, and where we both prioritize that. Well, that's a break from the system and a return to wholeness. Now, it's worth noting that energy that has been cramped up and stuck in painful withdrawal may need to go out again in the opposite side. So, for example, if for 20 years you've been stuck in this shape, and then you go to a seminar and a workshop that says feelings are okay, and you start feeling feelings for the first time in 20 years, well, you may need to go out here in this shape for a couple of months, a couple of years, before you release the pent-up dead energy that was stuck, that couldn't move through, and then you come back to your normal symmetry. The symmetry you would have been at if you'd never been asked to lie and suppress your feelings in the first place. The integration is, I'm separate from this. I've got all these different parts of me. I've got the adaptive part here, the adaptive part here. I've got my 5-year-old, my 4-year-old, my 2-year-old that's so terrified of these giants, my 20-year-old who's bitter and confused. I've got all these different parts. And the more integrated we are with these different parts within ourselves, the more aware they are, the more language there is, the more consciousness, the more feeling, the more range. Because going back to the range dynamic, if I can snap my finger and go down to 2 years old and say, oh, my 2-year-old is terrified of this situation. Snap my fingers at 5-year-old. My 5-year-old is very curious of this situation. Snap my fingers at 8 years old. I'm trying to set this up to get revenge on so-and-so around this and that situation. 14 years old, I'm feeling bitter and rebellious about this, and no one's going to tell me what to do. And 20-year-old, I'm just confused and overworked. And 30-year-old, I like this situation. If you can go through the entire range of inner ages, particularly the fixated and stuck and traumatized ages, you're now significantly more whole and more healthy. You can now do a really important thing in distinction and differentiation. This is how my 5-year-old feels. This is terrible for my 5-year-old. This is how my 2-year-old feels. This is terrible for my 2-year-old. This is how my 44-year-old feels, and it's a good choice for my 44-year-old. Therefore, to integrate, I'm going to spend some time differentiating the realities for my 2- and 5-year-old. I'm going to let them know I've got this one. You should never have to take care of my adult reality 2-year-old. It was too big for you to try and take care of your parents. It's too big for you to take care of it for me. I've got this. So here we are. There's also a dynamic of attachment and dissociation. So it's similar, but part of health is the full range of attachment and dissociation. And this is very much like a dance, and it ties into range again, because if you want to have the full human experience with human relationship, you will be able to traverse mutually feelings of desperation and belonging and need and intensity and desire and pleasure at meeting that need and all of that tightness and squeezing. You're in each other's arms, you're just squeezing each other so tightly, coming into the present with that energy. And you can breathe and move through that mutually as a dance. And then you can come to the point of complete openness and the complete freedom on the other side. After expressing this tightness, I can now release more on the other side than I ever could, because what I tried to do at 2 years old is I tried to be tight with my parents. Every time I tried to bond with them, they hit me or pushed me away, and I could never feel my tightness with anything. I could never attach. Well, now, so that energy got stuck, it got suppressed, it got repressed. And so I never grew up older than 2 years old. I'm a 2-year-old who needs to connect, who's terrified that I'll be hit if I need. And I'm in an environment where, in a sociopathic culture such as our own, the more need you express, the more you're attacked, because need is a feminine energy in a chauvinistic cult. So go away, you're needy. Go away. Not, you're needy, here, come to me. You're needy, I love meeting your need. Well, that's an empathic culture. You need something, that's why I want to give it to you. And if you don't need it, I won't give it to you. Because I'm empathic, I respond to you. In a sociopathic culture, in the banking industry, you need a loan, you can't get one. You don't need a loan, you can get one. In the sociopathic relationship banking system, you feel secure, don't need anything, happy, like yourself, everything's good. Lovers line up. As soon as you need something, please hold me, I don't know how to handle this traumatic terrain. The response is, get the fuck out of my face. I thought you were cool. I want nothing to do with you. I'm a sociopath, so the more you need me, the less I'm going to respond. I see. So I need someone, but I'm in a sociopathic cult, so I've got to hide my need, because if anyone gets a whiff of my need, they'll punish me, because that's what we do in a sociopathic cult. So this attachment and dissociation range part means that you have to have two people who can navigate through desperation, through need, through joy, through connection, through intensity, through squeezing, through holding, and on the other side, open up. See, the trouble is when you have, an unbalanced culture, when the opening up is cool and the need is uncool, but they're linked. It's a cycle. It's like if the wheel of the bicycle is to turn, then at one point in the cycle it has to go up, and in the next point it has to go down as it turns. Clenching and release, in-breath and out-breath, need and independence. Now, if you're committed, and this is what bizarre cults do, if you're committed to pretending that you're always carefree and baggage-free and the whole deal, then every time the wheel goes down here, you've got to suppress, repress, and lie. And then every time the wheel goes back up here, you've got to say, here I am again, not needing anything, I'm cool. And then back here, lying. And this is a very shaky system because it falls apart the more intimate you are. So now you've got to keep the person away from you to not see you, because then they're going to see who you actually are, which is that you're like everyone else. You go through cycles. You're very poor at one point, and then you're very rich at one point. You're don't need anything, then you need something. You go in and then you're out. Then you're masculine and then you're feminine. It's the natural cycle of life, which cults mess with by exonerating and deifying one part of the polarity and shaming the other part. So you've got to be able to go through attachment and dissociation as part of this cycle. And a very important metric of health is how much you embrace the unknown. The unknown is the feminine. It's also the largest portion of reality. 99.9% of reality is unknown. And one could even say unknown. We don't even know how much we don't know. That's how much we don't know. But it's higher than 99%. So if 99% of the entire multiverse is unknown, and it's unknown, if we are afraid of that, then we are afraid of 99% of reality, 99% of ourselves, 99% of all energy out there. If we avoid the unknown, we have an avoidant relationship with the vast majority of who we are, of who we could be, of the future, and of all that is unknown. It is thus incredibly unhealthy to have an instinctual, intense avoidance pattern with the unknown. So it's medicinal. The medicine for what is asymmetrical is to do what's not being done. If you give and give and give and will not receive, the medicine that creates wholeness is to start receiving and tone down the giving and make room for receiving. Now, with embracing the unknown, in a healthy growth relationship, at least 7% of your energy in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year, at least, is going into stuff you never knew before. Kite surfing, traveling to another location, reading a book by someone you passionately disagree. For example, if you're a liberal reacting to Jonathan Haidt, read, I think, is it The Compassionate Mind? Anyway, anything Jonathan Haidt writes about the political tensions is incredibly transformative. It's delightful. I love finding books that show me that I'm wrong. It's so much fun to be wrong because it makes the universe bigger. If I'm right all the time, then it's saying that the universe fits into my tiny world. But if I'm wrong a good chunk of the time, it's wonderful. It means that the world is much bigger than my paradigms, than my ability to map it out. And the reason I think that Einstein said that the question that is the single most important question we can ask as a species is the universe a friendly place? This was Einstein's most important question. Why? Because the universe is 99.9% unknown. Most of the billion planets, we don't know them. We certainly don't have names for them, and we certainly don't know what we'll find there. We don't know what alien life looks like. But the important thing is, do we want to know? And if we think that the universe is essentially a friendly place, then we want to know. We want to know who our friends are. If we think that the universe is overwhelmingly traumatizing and terrifying, we do not want to know what we don't know. We hide in our little circle. And one of the things you can think of this as a river. Imagine pissing in your own little pool in the river that has no energy flowing in and no energy flowing out. The waste from your body will eventually make that little pocket of known terrain toxic. Now, as soon as you open up and constantly bring in the unknown, you don't know what's going in upstream. You've got fresh energy flowing into the system, and you've got fresh energy flowing out. It's a healthier system that is not self-referencing. Healthy scholars study what they don't know. They don't read their own books. Healthy scientists look to the unknown with an open mind. They don't say, I already know what 2 plus 2 is, so let me study 2 plus 2. That's known already. They look to the unknown, and that's where we expand as a species. That's healthy. You're moving towards wholeness as you embrace the unknown. This is why healing trauma is such a big deal. If you are traumatized as an infant, and the trauma is denied so that you're driven crazy, and then the trauma and the abuse is called love, you will now be terrified of your friends, terrified of your family, terrified of the unknown. Because you're going to project the abusive family onto the God, which will fit very nicely in many, chauvinistic religions. You realize that there's not a single major religion that has a female deity at the top. There's not a single major religion that has a female deity or a feminine deity at the top. Well, that's pretty fucked up. When the space of religion is to imagine the closest thing to symmetry. Well, the closest thing to symmetry is a god and a goddess, and everything in between. God, goddess, all that is the closest deity to the actual framework of reality. Now, when every major religion has a male at the top, whether it's Buddha or Muhammad or Jesus or God or whatever it is, Allah, now you've got a distorted view, which, if you're nurturing feminine energy and you believe you're in an environment that is hostile to feminine energy, you're afraid of the unknown that you've projected out through the deification, because the deification is just the highest point we'll let our imagination go within a religious framework, within an ideal framework. And if that ends up, if the highest thing we can imagine is something that's shameful for femininity, then there's a problem.